And I'd like to say hello as well to Mandy and Shirley, and you, of course, Karen. But I'm just thinking in terms of, you've obviously invited people, so yes, I just want to say particularly thank you, and also to Mandy, because I know Mandy. Don't know you that well, Mandy, but I know Mandy's been really fantastic, like you, Karen, at supporting. To come to some of my lives, particularly on the Sunday, and it doesn't go unnoticed. I just wanted to say that. So thank you.
Welcome. They're really great.
Well, thank you very much for joining me for afternoon tea, Mandy, today, and being my guest. So my question to you, my first one is, what was your childhood like? Because we start at the beginning.
Oh, at the beginning, not that long ago.
At the beginning.
So literally when I was born, up until about age probably 4, maybe 5, we lived in a high-rise flat, and we being my mum, my dad, and I'm the eldest of 4 now, but then there would have been me and probably my brother, and then after there's about 1 year difference, 3 years difference. So after another couple of years, while we were still there would have been, Sonia came along, so that would have then been like a little baby. And the reason I'm saying all that is because we were nearly at the top, probably one butt at the top of this high-rise flat. So yeah, I remember, sort of mum obviously having a pushchair, particularly when Dean came along as well. And I've got a vague memory of there was a period of time where we had some of the power cuts, because and quite big power cuts. I remember, it's really funny. I've got quite a lot of memories actually from when I'm very young. When I look back and I realise what I do recall, people would often say to me, "How I don't understand how you can remember that." And I'm probably talking when I used to share some of my memories, probably from about 2. I remember my nan coming up in the lift and calling my name as the lift got higher and higher. I always found that quite amusing. So I remember that it said the power cuts, and also because on a Sunday evening or tea time, we used to sit and sort of have like bananas and custard and some sort of trifle type thing. So we used to have very similar things at certain times. And I remember when the power cuts were on, and obviously to keep warm because it was all electric. So we'd all literally, to keep warm, we'd all obviously be snuggled up in the same, like it's a bit tea time, but to keep warm in the same bed, like eating your bananas and custard or something. And then, and I went to like a little reception that I remember, because I just remember going to some Christmas parties and having some couple of gifts from there as well. But then really the main piece then was from about age probably 4 or 5. We then, which was brilliant for mum and dad, we then got moved. It was all council. We then moved to a house which was in Wheelie Castle. And so, to be honest, most of my main upbringing and most of the area I really knew was Wheelie Castle. And as I said, there was 3 of us. I'm the eldest, and then Matthew didn't come along. There's quite a big gap. I was about 13 when Matthew then came along. So that was bit of a. I think at the time it was a bit like, whoa, what happened there? Bit of a shock, so to speak. So yeah, and it was bit of a mixed bag really, because we didn't, probably like a lot of people of our time. I mean, we didn't have an awful lot. We didn't have a lot of money. But then we didn't go without by any means. You know what I mean? We were really, looked after. We was well presented. Mum was always make sure, that we always looked put together. And we never went without, sort of meals and stuff. But I was aware. Do you know what I mean? We didn't have masses. We certainly didn't have a lot of extra income coming in. So, and we as a family, we never ever in all my lifetime, we never went on holiday. So when I say to me, and it wasn't really a holiday, but we would, for example, we'd go out for the day, and literally, and it was mainly Manor Farm Park. We would go out for the day, and the day out would be to go to the park and take, you know, like sandwiches and beakers of pop and blankets and things, you know, to play with and stuff. But very probably typical of that, of the time and the generation and the ilk. I do also recall on and off throughout primary and early secondary age, there was it would come and go. There was definitely arguments in the background between mum and dad. There was, yeah, a number of arguments and tension, and that very much, to be honest, I think most of that stemmed around because money was short. And so if he, like a lot of men of his time, I suppose, if he, which he often did, you know, got his wage on the Friday and then perhaps went off to the pub, you know, he would spend some of that, you know, so that would, I think, create quite a lot of tension. And then him coming back at times, you know, when he'd had a drink, he wasn't the quietest when he'd had a drink. So, yeah, people would know from him normally singing some kind of Elvis song, which, you know, you can laugh at, probably sounds quite funny, but I know I've shared previously, you know, with other people when I really thought about stuff. Actually, at the time, you live in, you do what you're doing, but I think at the time, looking back, you know, I also think there was some, especially for mom, there was a lot of embarrassment. Do you know what I mean? You know, you would have definitely quite a lot of, probably felt quite a bit of shame, you know, oh my God, you know, sort of like, what will the neighbours think, that type of thing. So I do also remember, yeah, some of that as well. And I remember once, I don't know whether it's because to give them some time without us, I don't know, I would have been maybe about 10, maybe slightly, maybe 11. I remember that me and my sister and brother went, and so we never went away. So we went with one of my aunts, my uncle and the cousin. I think we went to Breen, some caravan. And roughly it was around, I don't know, say 5 days to a week. That was probably the only, certainly, you know, and I've got vague memories of it, really, you know, a holiday where the three of us, as in me and Sonia, all went, but without, you know, obviously mum and dad, to give them a break, sort of thing. So yeah, that was sort of, that's a large part of, I suppose, what I remember from primary age. I remember starting school slightly later, because by the time we'd moved, then you go to this reception and primary school. I remember going into this class, and I think it'd already been set up and established and been introduced, and having, you know, some people that take you on board as their friends, so to speak. So I remember that, and then that was sort of primary school. And then when I moved into secondary, I actually went to a girls' school. So it was called Bartley Green Girls at the time, which later on a few years later became Hillcrest, because it was that thing. A lot of the schools suddenly had some transition where boys were allowed, but they only came into the sixth form, so they had to change the name. It's like, but predominantly, you know, my memory is very much of it being a girls' school. And that was quite interesting, because it was originally a grammar school. But when I went, they'd not long changed it, when a lot of grammar schools changed comprehensives, but they still had the same headmistress. And I think that had quite an impact, because she still had the same ethos, the same, you know, wanted things to run in the same sort of way. So I always sort of felt that, I think, you know, there was probably quite a bit of rules and discipline and so on. But actually, that's also where, inadvertently, I remember they had this subject, which was quite unusual. It was called classical studies, which was on the curriculum. And this basically covered everything from the gods and Zeus and Odysseus, and the Greeks and the Romans, and archaeology and architecture and all that type of stuff, which I really, really loved. So I remember getting, if any of you ever did what we call O levels, and then the CCSEs, I actually got an A. Like, oh, I used to got an A classical studies. It was like, but I think so. But apart, you know, it was partly because I really enjoyed it. And I was a good student, you know, I enjoyed learning, I love learning, but I also think because mum and dad, but I think mum particularly, you know, she was quite strict, and we didn't go out. We weren't allowed to go out. Like I saw some people I knew, some friends, they perhaps would go out the local park or on the street corner or, you know, that sort of thing. Mum was very much, she didn't like you didn't do that. So, you know, she very much kept you played in the garden mainly, or we had a long path and long gardens. And if you went anywhere, I mean, it was quite, you know, it had to be somebody, you know, I mean, they knew really well, or, you know, really sort of trusted. So I'm saying that because I think my, if you like, I'm doing this, the energy I put into school and learning was partly because, you know, I had the time and energy to do it. I mean, I didn't have any other distractions, so that's what I invested in. And also being the eldest, I definitely had a sense of there was this expectation, that, oh, you know, Mandy's going to do well. You know, always I had that sense of there was that level. It wasn't a pressure. I never felt, my mum and dad, and particularly, they weren't. There was none of this. Oh, you know what I mean? We have these expectations of you, and we want you to go and, you know, do this or be this. It wasn't like that. But I definitely had some sense, being the eldest, of there was a hope, verbal or non-verbal, you know, that I would be the one that somehow did well. That was a sense of what I had there. And it was interesting, Karen, because I think, you know, we all have different views of ourselves, different perspectives. We might share something and somebody else says, oh, I don't think that, or I don't remember that. I actually had a view of myself when younger, growing up. I actually was quite shy, I think, and I was also quite sensitive. And I would say there were moments both in the area outside where we lived and also at school, particularly I think secondary, where I would say I was, the potential there was for me, I think, to be bullied. But I always seemed to, like my best friend in secondary school happened to be the most popular girl. So I always have those, my own thoughts where I still see her, and I said to her a few times, you know, we talked about things that I felt she sort of was my, not she did it consciously, she was my protector. She sort of saved me. She don't see it like that at all. I remember we spoke about it, and she was like, oh, really? No, I don't see it like that. And she didn't see me obviously in the way I saw myself. But I definitely remember that. And I remember at one point my mum, encouraging, there was the next door neighbours, they took their little girl to karate. They must have had a conversation about it at one point, and I remember my mum being okay with that. And I think that was because, you know, you know, she knew them, trusted them, went to this place, did the activity and came straight back home. But I think part of that, I felt, really, when I look back, was also perhaps to encourage me to be able to do something else that might instill some confidence as well, which I think something like karate and any type of, you know, sport like that can do, actually. Yeah. You need to shut me up, Karen, because otherwise I'll...
No? So your favourite subject at school was classics?
Yeah, classical studies and English. I love and English as well. English language, English literature, I adore. And I also actually really liked, when I chose my options, I really loved geography and history. And I was one, you know, probably like a lot of people, and they go, well, you can only choose this one or that one. And I was so torn between geography and history. And in the end, I for whatever reason, I can't remember, but I chose geography. But that wasn't an easy decision because I really, really liked history as well.
Yeah. And did you have any problems at school?
I say problems only in the sense that, as I said, I would have, it would have been easy, I think, to have had I think, you know, to have experienced maybe more bullying. And I always felt there was it was hard to sort of explain and put your finger on. I always felt there was a bit of low level stuff or little comments that would be made. But as I said, somehow I always seemed to, I think I wasn't quite at the full brunt of it, because there was always other people around that I think did actually work, you know, sort of look after me that little bit because of who I knew. The same when I had a couple of friends, and they were always a bit older than me. So a couple of friends who I had both in my local area where I lived, and they were about 2 girls who were about 3 or 4 years older than me. And there was a family that was known to be a bit bullyish. So I always felt that the other 2 girls sort of seemed to look after me a little bit. But also from as far as I remember, right up to mid-teens, I think I also wet the bed as well. And it wasn't until I was sort of about 12 or so that I remember Mum speaking to the doctors, and I had to take some little, all I remember is it's funny what you remember. It was a tiny red tablet. I remember, because it was just tiny and red. And I remember having to take that for about, I think probably for about a year. And then gradually, you know, they obviously assess and see how you're doing. And then you obviously reduce the time of taking it. And so eventually, probably by about 14, 15, I had actually completely stopped wetting the bed. But that was still, you know, but from the perspective of wetting the bed for a very long time, up until at least 13, you know, 12, 13. So, yeah, I suppose you don't really always think about or appreciate the impact of that. But I remember Mum having to work really hard, because we didn't have, like, when anybody else might have, like, some of my friends, I'd noticed they might have a washing machine, or they might have the first ones to have a recorder for the TV, or a microwave, or, you know, all that sort of stuff. We were never the first to have that. So I remember my mum, you know, I mean, it must have been horrendous really for her, like, you know, sheets, you know what I mean? To be physically hand washing bed sheets, you know, every single day, which she would have had to have done, you know, really. So yeah, that couldn't have been easy for her.
No.
But, you know, she just got, you know what I mean? You just do what you do, don't you? So she just sort of got on with it. But I think it was interesting, because I think one of the there's a real mix of stuff. So I think one of the things that maybe I don't know whether I appreciate, trying to think, do I underestimate its impact, which is when I was about 7, I was invited, there was like a local Sunday school, and I remember being invited to that. And I suppose because Mum was probably okay us doing something like that, because I don't know, you know, they have that look or feel about, well, it's a church and therefore it must be okay, and so on. So I remember being okay with that, really interestingly. And then I must have said to her, I quite enjoyed it going on a Sunday, and I suppose that interaction. And then I must have one point said, oh, you know, about taking my brother and sister with me when we're only little. And she was more than happy, I think, for me to do that, you know, which was probably about the only chance they got to have any, you know, free time, really. So I remember going to Sunday school, taking my brother and sister when I was younger, but I was very, and again, come back to the learning, I really thrived, I think, there. I became at one point, I mean, I'm talking about 12, 13, you know, I took on this role of being like a Sunday school teacher. A lot of my friends were there. We went out with the youth group. My friend Julie, who I still see now, I met her through that church and a few other people. So that was, yeah, I would say, it was interesting. That was really probably quite a big part of my life, in terms of the piece where I was allowed, in terms of Mum, you know, Dad.
Yeah.
They were happy with me to be involved in that and go there. There didn't seem to be any concern about that side of things. So yeah, I think that was quite a big part of what was important to me at the time, and what was, you know, what engaged me, what I was involved with as well. Yeah, I've still got I've got go upstairs somewhere. It's probably I'd say it's the oldest thing I've got apart from myself, which is I've got a Bible that was presented, and it's still got a little thing inside the Bible at the front, presented to me, and when I was 10 at the Sunday school, and I've still got that now. It's one of those where the pages are like paper thin. So, and I used to write a lot on mine as well. So, yeah, it's a lot of the pages, particularly the latter end, and I've still got them all in there, but they're all quite loose. Some of them probably look like they're going to fall out.
So you left school at 16, 18, was that? Did you
yeah. So I went to college. I went to Matthew Bolton College. But at the time, what was interesting, I do recall I was unsure what I actually wanted. Well, I was unsure what I wanted to do there, because originally, what I do remember quite vividly was I went through a phase where I wanted to be an archaeologist. And I remember telling them this at school, the careers thing, and being told, you know, you can't, at your age, there's no sort of course, there's nothing you can do right now. And it felt like a bit of a, you know, it was a block, dead end. It was like, well, you know, you couldn't really do anything like that till you're a bit older. And at the time, you know, I wouldn't have had the wherewithal, I think, or the resource, if you like, about me to be thinking, oh, well, I can go off and find things out. And I didn't have things like, you know, the internet was not really live the way it is now. So yeah, so that I felt like that was a bit and then I wasn't sure. And it was very typically one of my friends from school, Angela, was going to Matthew Bolton College, and she literally, she was saying, I remember saying to me, that's all right, you know, come with me, and you know, we'll have a look and we'll enroll and stuff. And so I remember going with her, and then I was still a bit unsure about some of the other subjects. I knew I liked English, but other than that, I was looking at all these other subjects, and she was doing home economics at the time. And so she's like, oh no, do that with me. It was the worst thing I could have ever done. So I took up, so I did English, I did home economics. I hated, well, the teacher, it's interesting, I didn't have a good experience, but I think that was partly down to the teacher as well. I don't think the teacher really was very, I don't know, just wasn't very encouraging. Particularly if you were somebody who you weren't quite, you know, perhaps you weren't grasping something quite quick enough. Whereas I always got this impression that he I think, and I mean this quite genuinely, I think he quite liked my friend Angela. So I always remember. I think there was I think he was happy to give her, you know, more time and tuition. I always got the sense, you know, that didn't come to me though, definitely not. So the reason I suppose I'm saying that is because that meant that I sort of had this one subject and I was struggling with, well, what else do I do? And what's really, you know, quite, I suppose, bizarre is that they did at the time then an OA. So it was a difference between an O level and an A level in psychology. And so I just thought, oh, okay, I'll have a look at that. And it was the best thing I did, because I really enjoyed it. And the whole area of psychology and my interest in that really opened up. But it was interesting how it worked, because I almost felt, you know, I didn't go into it first thinking, oh, I'm going to do psychology. But yeah, I found then this other subject that I really enjoyed. And then I sort of had a bit of a time really where when I then left college, I was still unsure really, you know, I think what I was doing, where I was going, so to speak. I was in quite a significant relationship at the time as well. So I was spending, you know, quite a bit of time with them. And I remember then for about a year through this, what's it called? Oh, there was a scheme at the time, like I don't know if it was YTS, but you know, there was some sort of scheme the government had put out there, and I actually did a scheme for a year, and it was a care visiting job, and I absolutely loved it, and I think I also knew, you know, that I did enjoy, you know, working with, connecting with people, and literally this job was, and it was mainly around in the area of back end of Northfield mostly, and it was everything from going to visit older people in their home, keeping them company, helping them with housework. It might have been going and doing shopping for them. I remember there was a blind lady I used to go and see, and we used to take her swimming. And it was, I just enjoyed the job. I enjoyed the miles I must have walked, because I didn't drive. I didn't drive till I was about late 20s. So I used to walk miles up and down the long Northfield lanes, but I really enjoyed it, and there was a really good team of people that worked there as well. So I enjoyed that. And then after that, I did quite a few other different types of jobs. So I did some bar work. I used to work at Sam Weller's and various sort of notes bar places that in Birmingham people, might recall or remember. I worked for quite a while at TGI Fridays. And then, so in between all of that, I couldn't even tell you what. I must have seen an advert and knew that some of the stuff I enjoyed doing. And I saw an advert for mental health nursing for training. It was at All Saints Hospital, but you also did the placement training as well with Dudley Hospital. And I just remember thinking, oh, okay, I might consider that. And at the same time, I was talking about traveling Europe with my friend Julie, and she was also thinking about teacher training. And it was really funny because I remember going for this interview for this mental health nurse training, and actually I think because I wasn't like, oh my life, this must work, I've got to have this. I think I sort of went in with a bit of an attitude of, oh well, we'll see how it goes. And when they offered me a place, I think I was a bit like, oh. So, and the same thing happened to my friend Julie. She got offered this teacher training, and I'm saying that because then we travelled Europe for a few months, and actually, I think we both had to come back to start, my training and her training in the September. But I think looking back at the time, if we hadn't have had that to come back to, I think we'd have carried on possibly travelling. Because we were just having such amazing experiences and met some wonderful people. And I would say that traveling Europe, and I mean, I would never have done that, by myself. So doing it with my friend Julie, she'd already traveled previously before. She was a little bit older than me. So again, I had that more experienced person to go with. But that was massive for me. I mean, that really, I think, probably had at that point the biggest impact on my life. I'd never done anything like that. I mean, to go and travel, all around different countries in Europe and all the experiences we had, that really opened my mind up, I think to other places, people, possibilities. That was a real significant piece. Yes, and then came back and then started my mental health nurse training.
So you became a mental health nurse?
I did, which I enjoyed every single minute of that training, every placement, every single bit of it. I met who I now still speak to. I've got these key people I've met at certain points in my life, from school, church, and the nursing, and I still have that. Even if we don't speak every day, there's something about those relationships that still connect us. And I met my friend Lorna there, and we were just, a lot of people who got to know us were like, how do you get on? Because it was like chalk and cheese in their eyes for many reasons, but we did, and we had a fantastic time, and so I really created a real friendship there, and still have that, which is as I'm sure we're all aware here on the screen. I think the older you get in life, the more you're, I think anyway, some of those, the couple of key friendships, I think, and if you've got any family members, but like say siblings, but I think particularly a couple of those key friendships, I think they're vital really to try and maintain where you can.
That's so then you went into your nurse training, qualified as a nurse.
Yeah.
And somehow you ended up in coaching and teaching. So how did that materialise?
So I qualified as a nurse, mental health nurse, but there was also a piece which was, as I sort of qualified and I was looking to do other areas of work, I was then in a relationship with my daughter's father then, and so I then was pregnant with Kaylee, and in fact it was 2 weeks before my 25th birthday, so I had Kaylee at that point, and I remember thinking, you know, the one thing I knew was that I really wanted to use my nursing skills, and intellectually, cognitively, I needed to be using my brain. So I remember thinking, oh, you know, I'll have a few months break and then I'll be looking for other opportunities, other jobs. And I remember a number of people at the time, you know, sort of saying, oh, see how it goes, man. Do you know what I mean? Once, you know, you got your little one and you may not want to go back straight away and so forth. But I started to look at other opportunities as such, you know, and see what was coming up. And literally, this job came up over Wolverhampton at a rehabilitation. Now, it's a rehabilitation nursing home, but it was for adults with mental health backgrounds who basically came to live there generally from around 12 to 18 months, and they developed independent living skills. So they were being then encouraged and empowered to either go and, some would live perhaps by themselves, but others it may be more to do, like say, supported housing and so on. So I applied for this job. Again, I think I wasn't really anticipating I was going to get it, and because the reason was when they offered it to me, it was like a bit of a, oh my life, bit of a shock, because Kaylee was then only a couple of months old, and I remember me and her dad having to really ramp this search up, because you know, for me, because he was working full time, this was a full-time job. So we started to look for childminders in the area, and you know, really had to work fast to do that. And it was just, we'd looked at a few, and I think it just, you know, it just didn't seem to be that, you know, sometimes you're looking for people and you're like, oh, and you meet a couple and you think, oh, maybe, but really deep down it isn't 100%. And then Kaylee's dad, one day, he must have seen some other contacts on the list, and I remember him calling me and saying, man, honestly, I've been to see this woman, she's perfect, she's fantastic, you know, I think definitely this will be the one. And I remember at the time feeling like, okay, because obviously I haven't met her yet, you know, and you're a bit like, and it turned out to be the best thing we ever did, because Dina, her name is, and yes, she was Kaylee's childminder, but to be honest, she became a lifelong friend. She became a more like a second mother to Kaylee. And whereas over time Dina took on other children, Kaylee was always the longest she had, and even to a point when she then was perhaps reducing, you know, taking on children as she was getting that bit older, she still always kept and maintained the relationship with Kaylee, and really did, you know, she treated her like she was her own daughter, even though she had a daughter and son of her own. And to this day, you know, we still see Dina. We have, I mean, Kaylee's got a very strong relationship with her. She's her she's her daughter's the daughter is now married and has their own little child, their little girl, and Kaylee's their, you know, the godparent. So it really is, you know, a real close knitted connection there. And I'm just saying that because that's had a massive influence, you know, in our lives, and also on to have somebody like that enables me, you know, and Kaylee's dad to still be able to work and do what we're doing, and to feel assured, you know what I mean, and trust that she's fine, you know, we don't have to worry about what's going to be happening, so to speak, you know, with her, because that was great. So I took on this job at this rehab centre. But what I noticed quite quickly was I was quite drawn to, I've always been very self-motivated anywhere, you know, whatever I've done with my work. And I create things and make them happen. So I really enjoyed the group work. And at the time, they didn't really have a lot of social groups for the for the patients there, as they were then called, and they didn't really have much for the staff as such. So I was very keen. I was like, right, well, setting up like socially independent living groups for the patients. I was also really keen to want to do staff training, and I saw it was a teaching and assessing course for nursing as well as teaching. And I saw this course and told the manager and was like, oh, I really want to do this. And he was like, oh, yeah, okay. So I did this teaching and assessing course, which was both a combination of teaching and clinical assessing for nurses. But then the love of that teaching part made me then consider I wanted to go on further to do my certificate of education to teach adults as well. And so I went on to do that while I was still doing that job, Wolverhampton. And then I actually saw a job came up. I saw it advertised for Sandwell College. But this was quite a specific, you don't, at the time, you didn't see these jobs. It was actually to be a tutor, but delivering personal development courses to learners who'd experienced mental health issues. And at that time, most of the work they were still doing, you went into community venues, into day centres, and you delivered the courses there. But it was a massive training ground because you basically had creative license to create, develop, deliver, evaluate a whole range of courses for learners that I really, I really enjoyed working with, and and got a sense of already. So, but the great thing about that environment was I felt it was more empowering, because the one thing I was really clear about was I did not, and after I'd been there, seen it, and went, no, it's not for me. I did not want to be working in acute settings, and at the time, what felt like, you could be spending hours on it, like almost like become a bit of a bodyguard trying to stop somebody from leaving a unit because they're under a section or something.
Yeah.
I knew very quickly that was never, it weren't going to fulfill me, and it wasn't using the skills that I had trained to do. So for me, this job, with learners who've got mental health needs, but empowering through education and combining the personal development was just perfect. So I applied and got the job. And yeah, and just love that, thrived, really developed. A lot of other things came out of that. I was involved in Mind as chairperson in Wolverhampton, steering groups in relation to mental health and well-being and so on. But I also then became interested. I knew of and heard of a number of people who were using drama therapy as well. So I went on an initial training course to see what that might be about, and really quite enjoyed that, got involved in that, could see how creatively it could really open up a different avenue. And so while I was then, and again, I've always just been then had this sense of, I'll be able to do that and develop that. So I applied, spoke to them about the drama therapy, and the college said yes to that at the time. So that was literally travelling up and down to London, Hatfield, because there weren't that many other places in the country. One day a week to do my drama therapy, while still obviously doing my work. And and then when all that was happening, I also began to realise I was enjoying developing more work that were also working with younger people, because you were getting a lot of people, like young people being expelled or coming into college that were just that they weren't quite the right age, but there was nowhere else for them to go. And so I was developing more of my work and my skills in that area. And I actually then went, while I was working still, went back to Birmingham University, and I actually did my degree, but with a pathway. So I got a degree in the mental health, but then that particular pathway was in child and adolescent psychiatry, because that just really, for me, connected, so many other dots. And you talk about the coaching. So it all took quite a path. So while I was doing all this and my work was just developing, and alongside, I started to realise that although I loved the work, it wasn't as fulfilling, perhaps. So I was looking for more of a challenge, perhaps. Not so much it wasn't fulfilling, but I think I was looking for a challenge. And I started to actually get asked, all happened very organically. I was having a lot of people asking me about, they wanted me to do the work. They didn't want the, an organisation or the process and the systems had to go with that. And so I began to actually develop more of my own work. And that's in essence where No Limits really started to develop and establish. But it was very much a case of, that work was developing over time. And I was developing my own group work and my own individual client work, and particularly with the therapy at this point as well. And then this is honestly how things work. One day I was speaking to somebody who's a friend of mine, and she turned around out the blue and she said, "Do you know what, man?" She goes, "This is out." She goes, "Have you heard about this coaching?" And I was like, maybe, but what are you saying about it? And she said, honestly, she says, "I've been on this training, I went on this course, and I have a coach myself, and the way, from what she knew about me, she said, I'm telling you," she said, "this is you." She goes, "This is, right up your street. You need to perhaps have a look at it." So what I did was, she knew somebody who was already a trained coach. So I actually had a coach first myself, as in, for me personally, to get a sense of how this might work, and really found that really helpful and powerful. And also because I love the style of the coaching and so forth, I started to get curious about the coaching they'd done and what the training involved. And this was with Coactive Coaching Training Institutes that were mainly based in America, but they deliver courses all over the world, Europe, America, Israel, Dubai, beyond. And that's where I then did one of their introductory courses. And that really blew my mind, actually, because it was really powerful. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, I've done mental health nursing, I've done drama therapy, I've had group and individual therapy and counselling that was required for me to do those, to have to do those other courses. And yet there was something about the coaching and that introductory weekend that just felt like, it really felt like I just knew that there was a lot of shifts, a lot of room for shifts to move. And so I never really looked back. I mean, I literally then I did my initial training. I then did my certification training for another year. I then trained with another company as parent teen coach because I wanted to develop that side of it and with the family work. I then did another year or two with a different organisation, which was called ORSC, which was Organisational Relationship Systems Coaching. So that really looked at the systems. It could be in teams, families. But that was really looking at the bigger picture of the dynamics. So I did that. And all of that was for me, was just connecting, embedding, supporting, developing my skill set all of the time. And I was just really enjoying it. And so I continued to develop but I forgot to say that probably about a year or two after I'd done the coach training, the initial coach training, I knew that I just knew I wanted more of. So I remember at the time speaking to what I was then still doing work for Samuel College, and I asked me if I could go part-time, and they said yeah. So I went part-time and started to then develop a lot more of my own work. But I'll be honest with you, very quickly, I just knew that I needed to then do more with my own business. I mean, it just, it wasn't enough, and I needed more of a challenge. So I then left Samuel College with that work and continued to develop a lot of my own work and the different strands. So my strands of work were the therapy, the training, the coaching, and I also have quite a big arm of what I call supervision. So I offer quite a bit of supervision, both to coaches, and I also offer supervision, particularly as well to therapists, practitioners who've come from that sort of background as well. So I'd say those are, if you like, I would say the key forearms, of the pieces. And when I was doing all of that, it was really bizarre, right? Years later, I had an email from somebody who used to work, I hadn't spoken to him in years, used to work at Samuel College. And they emailed me out the blue completely and went, by the way, man, this probably doesn't interest you, but I know somebody at Faircroft College who are looking for some personal development delivery. If you're interested, here's their email. Really random. So I thought, never know, I'm always open to whatever. And I emailed them, went in, this is going back in about 12 years, to see them. And I just literally sort of bit my hand off and went, when can you start to deliver some of these courses? Because they were in a position where some people had left quite quickly. So they're in a position where they needed to have some personal development courses delivered. And in a way, that was the stuff I was originally doing, very much at Samuel College. So, but this was still in my, I could still do that within my own time and space, because at that point you were taken on as what they called a visiting tutor. So you still went through your own self-employment and so on, because you had that flexibility. So that's where I then started to still do more courses within adult education as another piece, another arm, if you like, of my business. And that's, that definitely the adult learning and the empowerment of people who I think have not always had, for lots of reasons, they may not have quite had the chances in life from an educational perspective, or they have been told, or they've told themselves that then they're no good and they're useless and they're probably never going to achieve. And a lot of learners, or people maybe have gone through addiction. Maybe they were told at school that they were thick and they perhaps had some form of dyslexia and didn't realise. And also at the moment I've been doing some the last couple of years, but currently we're delivering I'm doing another course which is called Free Thinking, which is very much all about enabling adults who've experienced what you'd call modern slavery in all its guises, again, to empower them through education and learning. So that education, that learning, that knowledge, which can include the stuff we would talk about, like the confidence building and the assertiveness and the mental health awareness, but also it combines with things like developing IT skills, developing literacy, numeracy, CVs and stuff. So it's hopefully it combines different things to empower people. So I do have a particular, I've got a particular love there with the learners, and I also still deliver some of the courses I'm talking about and the type of training I do in a different arena. I will offer like an introductory course to coaching, an introductory to mentoring. So, I can still enable them to get and understand perhaps where some of that can fit in. And also there's a lot of work being done at the moment around, for example, using coaching in and with addiction, and for people who are in, say, for example, recovery and are wanting to really, develop more the coaching style to be able to, empower other people going through a similar process as well. So so that's, I felt I needed to add that, because that was quite a piece that came back around full circle. And the weird thing is, or if I say weird, that's how it feels, is that so Faircroft is literally, you know, on that, just coming down beyond in Selly Oak, and you've got Westfield College, and then you've got Woodbrook Centre as well down there. And I actually, at one point, just before I did my, I started to do some of the tutoring there, I actually went and did some of my Enneagram training at Woodbrook Centre. So it feels, that area there, and bear in mind, I lived, when I say Weirdy Castle, it was on Presswood Road, which is literally where the duck, if you know any of this, it's where the duck pond and the Raven pub is. So it felt very, feels very familiar to me. It's really interesting. And I remember when I did my Enneagram training, it's really interesting. I remember coming down Shenley Lane at one point. I remember driving down, having this really quite moment of experience where I remember driving down this lane and in my head going, I look to my right, and I'm going, oh, just over there on like Meeburn Close was where Nan and Grandad lived. That was my mum's mum and dad. They were now dead. So I carried on down the lane. I'm literally looked to my left, and just there was a house on the corner. I remember thinking, oh, that's where Dad's mum and dad lived. They're now dead. And as I carried on down, and then Presswood Road was on my left, I remember thinking, that's where we all grew up. But now my dad's dead. So it felt like it was I don't know, you know, like a real journey of, you come back to something in an area that I suppose you sort of know is familiar on so many levels, but I was just very conscious that there was, you know, a significant people, you know, that are a significant part of your life. It was just a bit of a mental note of, they're now gone, they're gone. So yeah. And I haven't said anything, talking about gone, I mean, you know, I haven't really said anything about the fact that, you know, that those people are gone. But I mean, my mum, you know, so we had some big challenges that went on. So without going into too much detail, my dad got knocked over when he was about, I mean, I don't know, 47, I think he was, 48. I lose a bit of track, I have to look back, and he had a very, very, I mean, serious head injury from it, and was in the old, 5 Ways, the old accident hospital for about 6 months. So it was a long time. And when he came out, it was a very different man. Couldn't work, couldn't really function in the same way. And that had a massive impact on the whole family in different ways for different reasons. And also my youngest brother then, bear in mind, you know, we were all that little bit older, and still not old, you know, I mean, we're a little bit older, whereas my youngest brother then would have been about 11. So massive impact. And then Dad obviously came back home with this head injury, probably Matthew thinking, probably couldn't even get his head around, you know, well, who's this person in a way. And then my mum still, you know, getting on with stuff and obviously accepting this is the way things are. But then after a few years, which everyone, you know, sounds, you sort of, you make these assumptions when you see how people are, and obviously the way it left my dad with the disability, you sort of made a bit of it sounds awful really, but there was an assumption in your mind that somehow, based on how things were and how things had developed, Dad will probably go before Mom. But after a couple of years, you know, Mom had been experiencing some back pain, which I think you hear somebody say back pain, but you're probably not really thinking too much, and you've got your own life and doing whatever. And then it got so bad that she got a referral eventually to the orthopedic hospital, and they did a stem cell test, and that's where they found out she'd got cancer in the bone marrow. But she was 53, so they were like, oh, she's young, she go to the QE, stem cell research, you know, it was all still like, oh, things can be done. But I just think, looking back, I don't think anybody realised. She'd already probably, it affected her bones probably that much by the time that they found out. They had her straight in, started to give treatment, but within a couple of weeks, you know, all those contraindications they mention were just happening. You know, and her body just started to collapsing, literally. I know it's not, I'm just, it's very matter of fact, because obviously, it's about 20 odd years ago now, but in the end, because the bones were so weak, the ribs literally began to break and cave in. So as they then crush, and then, they're trying to still help her through a breathing tube, and there's still this, when you're going through stuff like that, you're still thinking, oh, there's hope, because she went to intensive care, and then it was all a bit, oh, what's going to happen? And then she was in like some unconscious type, I'll say like a coat, not coat me, but it was that type of thing for a couple of days, and there was this talk of, perhaps now that she's going to go, and then she sort of came out of it, but which by that point she'd had a tracheotomy. So she actually couldn't then speak properly, so she's having to write things down. And so you still have those moments of, well, maybe. But in reality, once that had happened, you know what I mean, your chest and your ribs, and it was the breathing then. So that becomes then very difficult. So she died after about, from the moment of going in, us finding out, 4 weeks. That which left my dad in a council house with my brother, who was then, obviously, Matthew was what? What was it while she was in hospital? I'm trying to think, August. I think he might have just had his 18th birthday while she was in hospital. So without going into too much detail, that became really challenging and really difficult, and for him and for Dad and everybody. And I think we tried to enable Dad and my younger brother at that point to stay in the council property with support and care and all the rest of it, but for various reasons it just wasn't working. And it was a lot Matthew was just struggling big time as well, understandably. So in the end, I being the eldest as well, it's interesting. I spoke to the other people, siblings and other people, and made a decision that really didn't take lightly. But the only other option, because we didn't have any money, and Dad didn't have, there was no money for anything really. So the only option was to go into a nursing home, but that was still quite difficult because Dad was still quite young. So it's sort of late 50s to be going into and there weren't any options being offered when you haven't got really any money either. So most of them were, older people's homes. And in the end, we ended up finding one that, you look at different ones and you think, okay, this is the best of, and it was more of a nursing home. So they did have quite good care, but the reality was that it was in a home, do you know what I mean, with lots of older people around him. And so I think over probably a year or two, he just began to deteriorate, you know what I mean, and give up a little bit, because I don't believe that. I just think I'm not knocking, that sometimes it is what it is in life, and that's what happens. And I think it's hard for people to make that decision, but it's also hard, for people who perhaps working with, those individuals and trying to be able to deal with that. But I just feel ultimately it was hard. I think he wasn't always able to communicate as clearly as what he used to be by any means. But I think on some fundamental level, he knew that, there wasn't a lot of hope there. Do you know what I mean? He wasn't really didn't have a lot of purpose, I think. And I do believe that quite strongly. I think when, people, when there isn't a lot of purpose anymore, and people aren't feeling what's the point,
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's sad. So you said that you were shortlisted for the TES award.
Yes.
What did that stand for?
So it's teaching, educational, and society. So basically, any sort of any main teaching awards come under this sort of umbrella, if you like. And it's very, people in the teaching world, when you mentioned, test, they're like, oh, you know, that it's a bit like in nursing, you know, people mentioned a particular name of something, you know, and people go, oh yeah, that's a big thing. So, you know, so with the TESS awards, you know, for teaching, and that they cover primary, secondary and adult further education, you know, the different sectors. But in this case, it was obviously for me delivering courses with adults, particularly with, you know, a range of various backgrounds and if you like, vulnerabilities. And it was actually, in fact, it was the person who was on the original, when I went for my original interview years ago to do tutoring. He was there. Michael, his name was, with another lady who I still know, and he was the one. I mean, he's actually the vice principal of Faircroft. I did, unbeknown to me at first, he put me forward.
Brilliant.
I was actually, I think at the time, I think I was a bit shocked, really. I was like, what, you know? So he put me forward for this award because he obviously really believed that I deserved it and that I'd, you know, worked hard. Yeah, to do that, really. But it was funny because I think it wasn't a lifetime achievement award. But actually, I think what I started to realise, the more it began to sink in, and the more I began to really be, you know, aware of it and think about it, I think being put up for that award felt a bit for me like it was an accumulation. Because although it was specifically, you know, for you know, teaching with adult learners, for me, all of my skills and all of my experience, you know, that I've brought together all of my life, I don't, you know, that's all part of it. You know, I mean, I don't just deliver, you know, teaching with adults and my head goes, oh, I'm going to so today, you know, I'm going to teach this piece here, so I won't bring any of Mandy's other learning or coaching experience or, you know, all my other life experience. It doesn't work like that.
No.
You know, it doesn't for me anyway.
No.
So I did feel like it was more of it started to feel like it was it's a real big lifetime achievement award. And I'll be really honest with you, and it is what it is. I could not, honestly, of all the times, it was supposed to be this big, prestigious, you go down to London, you know, it was a proper, like, there were, who was it they had now? Oh gosh, it'll come back to me. They had some big named performer, comedian. Oh, Julian Clary.
Oh yeah.
You know, it was supposed to be the presenter of the night, and it was you know, that whole thing. I mean, I'd never been to anything like that, so for me it was like, oh, you know, it was quite exciting. And literally, when it was all, honestly, it's just, oh god, it's horrible really, when it was all meant to happen, so that week, in the week or two in March, where there was some question mark last year of, hang on, what's going on here? This is getting quite serious with the virus and so on. But there was still a lot of unknown. And it was literally that week where people went, oh, I think a lot of things, this is serious, it's all going to shut down. And so, as you can imagine, an event like that with a lot of people, so it was cancelled. We went into lockdown, and then because there was then so much unknown of, well, you know, can you do this? Can you do that? What point? When? Eventually, the latter part of the year, they did it. They had an award online, and of course, don't get me wrong, it was nice to still have that something being done and acknowledged. But it was bittersweet. I'm not going to lie. There was a part of me that thought, of all the years, why? I mean, why? But somebody else might just turn around and go, well, why not? You know, it was you couldn't have made it up if you tried. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's one of them.
Yeah. So, and then you set up the Courageous Coaching Conversations.
Yes.
That you're still running on a Sunday.
Yes. Yeah.
you give a lot of value, because I do listen to it.
Thank you.
You also record it.
Yeah.
So how can people get involved if they want to get involved in that?
So this is where I'm really bad, because I'm sitting there going, so I couldn't tell you the exact content of, like, you know, you probably go, oh, now Mandy's got, like, you know, if you go to www. Like, if people went onto Facebook and they looked up Mandy Gutsell, if they looked up courageous coaching conversations around the coffee table, it would come up with me on Facebook. So they could sort of, you know, they could join on that. And then obviously, you know, could sort of engage them more in some of the lives and the things that people might be interested in. And so, yeah, in terms of I've also got, I'm on LinkedIn as well. Again, under Mandy Gutsell. I'm being ever so naughty, I know, because I don't know whether you expect me to give you information. This is me in terms of, you know, I suppose the one thing, because I do my stuff, if that makes sense, and I don't tend to always then think, a lot of the times, like when I've spoken to other people, they'll be saying to me, oh man, you know, you know, like you really should you should say a bit more, does that mean, you know, about, you know, what you do and promote it and so on. Like I just got my my PCC, which is quite big with ICF, International Coaching Federation. It's professional certified coach. Well, PCC is quite big, really. It's like you basically have to do a big 3-hour knowledge assessments, and you have to also prove that you've got at least 500 plus client coaching hours, and I've just achieved that. And again, I mean, it felt good, don't get me wrong, but a couple of people were like, maybe shouldn't, you know, maybe you should advertise that man more. And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, yeah, and I'm like,
Start blowing your own trumpet more, Mandy.
what was that, sorry?
Start blowing your own trumpet more.
Yeah.
I mean, I know you can sing.
Well, apparently, I'll tell you something now, right, and this is not a lie. I do not, and I mean this genuinely, I swear to you, I'm not making this up. I do not personally think I can really sing. And I mean that. I enjoy singing, and I think if you pick and choose your songs right, some are better suited to your voice more than others. So I love the acknowledgement, and I'll take it. But it's like,
so if we look back over your life, would there be anything that you would change, or are you looking at it as though you've learned and it's all part of your life experience?
Yeah, I mean, there's no, for me, I'm not even, there's probably, I could probably say, or maybe, you know, but you can't, because I could say right now, there might be one thing that I could consider on reflection, in hindsight, maybe I'd do a bit differently. But I did what I did, and I'd say this to other people at the time, based on where I was at and what I knew and how I was feeling. So I don't think that I can actually turn around and say, oh, you know, I if I could go back and change, do you know what I mean, something, could do something differently. For me, no, I wouldn't. It's pointless me even contemplating that concept, because the reality of that question is, well, I can't. So for me, it absolutely is a case of, well, you take what you take from the experience, you learn, hopefully, you know, you learn from it, you look at how you apply it to other areas of your life, and you may end up, because obviously we're all work in progress, so we may end up still doing some things or putting some things into practice which actually we know, you know, deep down may still not quite be, you know, what we could be doing, or maybe the best option of, and we still do that, you know. I don't know if, so hopefully that sort of makes sense. I don't see any, I'm one of those people, I see no purpose and point in regrets and what you could change, because you can't change it. And I do believe it influences and makes you, you know, the person you are, for definite.
And if people listening to the broadcast or on the broadcast want to get in touch with you, can they get in touch with you through Facebook?
Yep. So, I looked at my page again and I've lost it. So they can definitely get in touch with me on Facebook. As I said, if they put in just Mandy Gutsell, then that would come up. Also, the courageous coaching conversations around the coffee table would come up. I've also got there's twitter.com/GutsellMandy. I'm terrible with these things. There's my LinkedIn.com, Mandy Gutsell. They can also email me, so mandy@nolimitscoach.com, and that's no limits as in KNOW limitscoach.com. And my business number, which I've had since year dot, has remained the same for years and years, because I've always wanted that consistency. So my number, which is 07951 229941, is the number I've had forever, basically. That's never changed. So people can get hold of me in that way as well.
Okay. Does anybody want to ask Mandy any questions? We've got about 2 minutes, because I know Mandy's got an appointment at 3:20. What do you want to ask Mandy?
I'd like to ask Mandy that she's done a lot, she's had a lot of experience through all your therapies and your jobs and everything. You read a lot of books.
Yeah.
Why are you going to write your own book about yourself?
Really good, really good question. I'm pausing. I've had lots of different thoughts and ideas come and go, actually, over the years in relation to writing a book. At one point, I was actually creating something with my daughter, and that for reasons hasn't come into fruition. But it's still, there's still some work there. I've also thought about, you know, sometimes when I've been sharing about my journaling. So for the first 6 months or so of the lockdown, I did this diary where I'd put dear mom, and say some things about what I was feeling, and then my daughter, dear Kaylee. And part of that was trying to connect two people when I knew, obviously, my mum could never connect in that way because she's dead, but that felt quite important. And as I've been reading those more on the Sunday lives, I can see whereby it's bringing out other themes, you know, that I feel are very, really important and useful, and I think would be, good tools, you know, and things to share and connect with other people. So I'd like to think so. And everybody who I speak to knows me just goes, man, you know, of course what you do, you know, what are you doing? Why have you not? It's like, but I'm not quite sure what that looks like. Almost feels, as I'm saying it to you, it at times the thought of it, I suppose, can feel quite overwhelming, really. And maybe there is something in the business name, you know, no limits. But I've always loved that idea of paradox. It's like there are no limits, but actually I don't believe that's quite true either, because there are no limits, and the paradox is, and you need to know your limits at the same time. So there's something in that. So I'd like to think so, Mandy. It's the bottom line answer. But right now, I can't say hand on heart, yes, Mandy, this is exactly, do you know what I mean? This is exactly what I'm going to do and how I'm going to do it. But it's sort of something that's been at the periphery for quite a long time in different ways, and I keep being asked.
Okay, thank you very much.
Have you got any questions, Shirley? No? Yes? No? No. Okay.
Shirley's going. I'm listening. I'm taking it all in. Thank you. I'm digesting. I love your purple, by the way, Shirley. Just wanted to say, different shades of purple like that.
Thank you very much, Mandy, for joining me for afternoon tea today.
No, thank you. It's been honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I feel really, really sort of quite uplifted and inspired, you know. So yeah, no, so thank you for the opportunity, and thank you all for taking, you know, time out of your lives and your day to be with me. So it really does mean something to me. So thank you.